What's up, everybody? I'm Greg with Delta, and this is the Be the Difference podcast. This podcast is all about making you a better person in your life and in your business with coaching on sales, leadership, mindset, marketing, everything under the sun when it comes to being an entrepreneur. And we bring on guest speakers. Today, I've got the honor and pleasure of welcoming Mr. Andy Brown. Andy, how you doing, sir?
Hey, Greg. Very excited to be talking to you. The most energetic podcast host I know, and the man that said challenges aren't just obstacles, they are opportunities for growth. I loved it when you said that on a podcast recently, and I just thought, that's the man I want to talk to.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I appreciate you listening. So for those of you that don't know who Andy is, let me go and introduce him. 35 years ago, Andy Brown paid his way through college by carrying out street interviews for advertising and agencies. And this taught him not to be shy and got him hooked on the field of advertising. Fast forward, and Andy now has 30 years experience as an award-winning advisor and coach for people-based businesses, helping them to grow sustainably and increasing their value. He's done this by enabling founders and leaders to make better decisions more quickly, as one client has put it. He's also the author of The Emotional Overdraft, 10 Simple Changes for Balancing Business, Success, and Wellbeing, a book that shot straight to Amazon's #1 bestseller spot when it launched in early 2024. It also received Amazon's Most Gifted badge. The book is written for entrepreneurs, leaders, and founders and articulates the often overlooked mental and physical costs of leadership. Andy's mission is to eliminate the damage inflicted on individuals, businesses, and communities from the avoidable burden of emotional overdraft. The emotional overdraft identifies the 10 drivers of an emotional overdraft and the hidden cost line in many leaders' P&L statements. The book enables leaders to create a healthier relationship with their business, loved ones, and themselves. In the process, helping their company to thrive in ways they never could imagine and without having to try so hard. Andy, I love that intro. That sounds fantastic. This would be a good conversation.
I love that you memorized it for me. That was so kind.
Talk to us a little bit about you getting started in advertising, talking to people, grinding it out in parking lots, like you were saying.
Well, exactly. I was, my parents, my family had never been to university. No one had ever been to college. And their view was you should go out and get a job. And so when I got into university, it was sort of on me to pay my way. And I met someone who said, look, if you stand in the street and ask people questions, we'll give you money for it. And I thought, I can do that. Yeah. And I think in the end, I did about 20,000. It's called field work. I did about 20,000 interviews in my 4 years at college. And you learn very quickly not to eyeball people too early. You learn not to jump in on them. You've got to kind of make it feel natural. You just learn how to approach people and ask them questions and then get them to respond. If you go, have you got a minute? They all go, no. You've given them the choice. If you say, I'd really value your opinion. Can you spare me a minute? Everyone wants their opinion to be shared, so people can't say no to, I'd really value your opinion. Who walks after that? Nobody, including me. So you learn that. And I was doing it mainly for advertising agencies, which is, the business I got into. And I just loved the psychology of that. I loved understanding why people did what they do and how you could kind of influence them and help. I mean, you could argue that, it's a pretty parasitic business, advertising, but it's also, a force for great good where you can influence people to do the things they wouldn't otherwise do, throwing litter in bins. There's 1,000 little tiny micro habits that you can influence through advertising. So over the years, I've convinced myself I wasn't quite such a bad human.
I love the focal point that you got to about human behavior, and you dropped a couple nuggets, and I kind of want to dig in more on that about like, one thing you learned was you don't, give eye contact way too early, right? Or you don't just start off with the question.
Well, it's a weird experience if you're walking down the street and there's some one guy staring at you, waiting for you. I mean, just, people tend to cross the street or call the police. You don't do that.
Yeah. So what are some other ones that you learned? Some like just basic human, almost psychology tactics or strategies that you applied that you kind of just learned through failing and doing and testing new things, right? I assume there's probably a lot that you learned during that time frame in terms of human psychology.
Yeah, I think so. And I suppose I haven't really analysed it too much, but I think there are definitely some lessons I've taken with me as if I look back, and one is to be genuine and sincere about it. If
Okay.
you are asking people questions and you're bored and you're disinterested and disengaged, it's a big stretch to ask them to be engaged in it too. So I think I've always taken I'm someone who, whatever I do, I'm a very curious and interested person, and I love understanding how things work. So, and
Yeah.
if you bring that and ask someone a question and they can feel that you're genuine and that there's someone who really does care about what they're going to say, rather than just writing it on a clipboard and not making eye contact. I mean, at some point you have to make eye contact. So, I think that sort of authenticity is really important. And that's, I ended up in the comms business. I ran communications businesses, and authenticity is the sort of the gold dust you're looking for in by proxy through advertising. You can't be there to say the things you want to say, so you have to kind of get that authenticity into the communication. So I think that really caring, really, you can't fake it unless you've got, some psychosis. Basically, you can't fake authenticity. We can smell it. Humans are brilliant at smelling it. And
Yeah.
that I was in business development, I was in sales, I was in many roles in advertising agencies, planning and strategy as well. And so knowing that, understanding that, was a big takeaway for me. Just that it's very difficult to fake authenticity. So when you're asking people questions on the street, they can tell through your body language whether or not you care about it, whether it's authentic. So that was a big takeaway, and that's rolled through my career. Now, I don't know if I learned that or if I just naturally had that. I mean, it's hard to say, which caused which, but I was pretty good at it, and I was pretty good at getting people to tell me what they wanted to tell me. So that was the other thing. I think it's interesting when you stop someone in the street and ask their opinion and they share something. If you say thank you at the end of that conversation, they will carry on talking and give you more. You will theoretically or apparently be closing the conversation down. But if you thank them with any kind of level of sincerity, they kind of lean in, their body language changes, and they go, there's something happening here. There's something authentically happening here. I'm prepared to give more. And then you get more information. And that's when the really interesting stuff happens. It's a bit like on podcasts. I do my own podcast, and you finish the podcast, you say thank you, and then the person starts saying all the good stuff you wish they'd said in the podcast. And you go, come on, you could have, and I've switched the mic off, for God's sake.
Yeah.
So I think I suppose that's something else that it may be just part of authenticity. I might just be milking the same insight here, but I think I would always make a point of saying thank you and meaning it, and you would find other stuff would happen, or people would stop. There's something quite interesting about if you watch people, someone who's stopped by do you have the term chugger in the States? Do you know what is a charity mugger? It's one of those charity people. They're paid
Yeah.
to stop you on the street, and every person they can get a commission, get to sign up to a thing, they get a commission.
Mhm.
And they're called chuggers in the UK. People can see that, and they will go wide of those people, and they'll try and avoid those people.
Yeah.
If you're standing there with a clipboard chatting to someone and they're leaning in, and people start stopping, so you then get people going, I'll answer those questions. I mean, it's the most amazing thing. So people like signals. There's a brilliant video about how to build a movement in 2.5 minutes. It's a TED talk. I forget the name of the guy who did it, but it's all about how human behavior can create a whole movement in seconds. It's a fantastic video. I'd recommend it.
Okay.
But it's
I'm actually going to check it out.
it's built on that idea, which people follow each other. They're looking for social cues around them. So it isn't odd that when you stand in the street with a clipboard and on the face of it you think most people would never stop, that people suddenly start stopping and talking to you.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing some connection happening, and people want to know what that is, and they want a little bit of that, and they want to know what's going on. So I think these are the sorts of things I took away from it. it did me a lot of good. It also, God, it taught me to respect hard work and money. My word.
Yeah.
It's not an easy way to. I'm not recommending this to anybody listening to this as a means of making money. It's not great,
But
but
it laid a really good foundation for you,
oh
right?
yeah, yeah,
That
undoubtedly, yeah, yeah.
helped like, I don't think you'd be the Andy today that you are had you not gone through that for 4 years and things you learned and the experiences that you had. And for those of you listening, the authenticity piece, it doesn't just apply to the field that Andy's talking about, or specifically just advertising. But think about it like this: if you are trying to grow, say, a social media platform, okay, you try to grow your Instagram or TikTok or something like that, and you're consistently doing content. You're like, dude, my content's not hitting. It's probably because it's not authentic. Like, you're probably copying someone else. You're trying to like reword somebody else's statements.
Mm.
It's not coming from you, right? Because if you are authentic in your message, you will get people that will gravitate towards you, that will start to like you. Now, it's not going to be a lot but over time it'll get better and better and better, and it's just a consistency factor, right?
And you
There's
don't need everyone to like you. You
exactly.
know, everyone listening to this has a big market. Whatever market you're in,
Yeah.
particularly in the States, you have a big market. And if 10% of the people in that market love you, you'll be a success. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if a massive proportion of people don't connect with what you're saying. If you are genuine and authentic and sincere about what you're saying, and they get the sense of you, a very good proportion will connect with you. Once they start connecting with you, then you start to build the movement, and other people will see it happening and they'll come along because they don't want to miss out.
Yeah.
So human nature is, once you start to get some volume, but it's a bit like when we write a letter to an official organization or a doctor or somebody, we suddenly start writing in a different way. And I think a lot of people, when they produce content, they go, oh, now I'm producing content, I've got to produce something in a particular way or in a particular style.
Mhm.
Whereas the reality is, if you just trust yourself, if you went with it, be as professional as you can, the quality is, it should be as good as you can. But if you're as authentic as you can be, people will respond to that.
Mhm.
They will do the equivalent of stopping in the street. They will do the equivalent of leaning in. They will do the equivalent of telling you more. They will do the equivalent of inviting other people to stop and contribute. I mean, that's what authenticity will do for you. So you're totally right. It is exactly correlated with that sort of behavior, because we're humans and it never changes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so once you had that experience in your college time frame, fast forward 30 years, and now you're helping people-based businesses. You're helping, and you wrote a book about
Yeah.
emotional overdraft. So talk a little bit about the book that just recently was released and shot to the top of the Amazon bestseller list.
Yeah. My book baby. It it's I mean, my business for the last 15 or so years, 20 years, has been running agencies. I quickly ended up, I'm good with people. I can get people to do things. I my biggest successes are spotting talent. I think I'm good at spotting talent and promoting talent. I don't care much about getting that recognition. What I love is seeing people grow and thrive and develop. So it naturally led me to leadership roles quite early on. I ran my own business and sold it as well, which was a great experience. So I've been working with people. I'll talk about people-based businesses. I mean, you could say service businesses, but I don't think that's what they are. They're people-based. I don't know anything about manufacturing. I don't know anything about, financial. Well, I don't know about financial services, but if you're making stuff and have inventory, I don't know that. I know about, if you rely on people to deliver your service, I absolutely know how to run those businesses and make them more valuable. And over the time I've been doing that, and initially running them, and then in the last 10 years or so advising companies about it, I've seen the biggest, perhaps not the biggest, but one of the biggest impediments to the success of growing businesses is the entrepreneur, the founder, the leadership, whose instinct or reflex is to say, what's the problem? The answer's me. And that works if there's one of you or two of you sometimes. And even then, actually, it's not really the right solution. If the answer to the question you're posing to yourself just before this podcast or just after this podcast is, I should work harder, you've got the wrong answer. Of course you should be working hard, but you can't keep working harder. You can't work twice as many hours or 3 times as many hours or 4 times as many hours. That's not scalable. So to have a successful business, you need to go, what's the smart next step? And the emotional overdraft comes from the pressure of founders who think the solution has to come from them. And it might be because they don't trust other people to do something, so they don't let go. It might be what I call JFDI, which is, my editor told me I have to describe as just flipping do it, but it's, means something else. But that kind of mentality of I just get on and do things. I'm just a doer. These things are great. They're fantastic behaviors. And there are 10 behaviors I've identified in the research. But they're also limiters in your business, because if you don't trust your team, if you can't let go, if you can't hire great people and give them the headspace to do amazing work, they're going to go, or they're going to regress and they're going to wait for you to tell them what to do. And suddenly you've got a team where you're thinking, why do I have to tell them everything? Why am I the only one with the ideas? So an emotional overdraft is that debt that founders run up, and it ends up damaging their resilience. The currency of emotional overdraft is resilience. Your resilience becomes lower because you've created some unsustainable ways of running your business. That's broadly what it is. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And you
I mean, most people recognize it. The research, I researched 50 companies before I researched 50 companies and then spent 2 years not writing the book, because it's really hard writing a book. So I spent 2 years, but the research showed that 49 out of the 50 companies I spoke to, the founders and leaders all recognized the mentality that's subsidizing the business through your own mental or physical cost is how I define an emotional overdraft. And we all do it. If you run a business, no matter how big or small, you have done that. And the way you handle that is how it limits or defines how successful you will be. If you can go into an overdraft, that's a great thing. An overdraft is a fabulous facility. It's there. It's burst capacity. It gives you the ability to make decisions and do things you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. Yeah. But it's a really dumb way to fund your business. And it's a really dumb way through your own emotional overdraft to fund your business, because you should pay it back. We know an overdraft is an expensive form of borrowing. It is emotionally, it is financially. So it's there for a purpose, but you need to go in and get out. You go in and get out. You don't live in your overdraft. That is expensive.
Yeah. And I can tell you, being a business owner, entrepreneur myself, there's been many times where I've lived in that period or lived in that space for far too long. And it causes you to just get worn down and burn out.
And not only that, the worst thing about emotional overdraft is once you sort of recognize it, and all I've done is label it. You could call it, aubergine. It doesn't really matter, but giving it a label helps. So that's my advertising background. Labeling something makes it easier to communicate. But with an emotional overdraft, the problem is you can be borrowing other people's emotional overdrafts. So it could be your family who are paying the price of the way you're running your business. It could be your friends. It could be your health. So many founders you talk to, so many entrepreneurs sacrifice their fitness. I'm looking at you, you're a fine figure of a man. You've clearly got this worked out. But so many founders sacrifice their own fitness, their own wellness, because they believe they just need to spend more and more time, at the coalface. And that's paradoxical and nonsense.
Yeah.
But they can't see a way out of it. And that's what I'm trying to get people to do, is to recognize something different. Brilliant story about someone I spoke to recently. And she has run over 2,000 days consecutively, over 2,000 days without fail. And a run for her is a minimum of 2 kilometers, so about 1.5 miles.
Okay.
And I said, how did you do that? Because and she runs a business. This lady's a very successful business. I said, how did you do that? And she said, before I really got to grips with this, I was someone who tried to run every day. But she said, now I'm someone who runs every day. And she said the mind shift for her, trying to run every day, gave her permission occasionally not to run. But someone who runs every day finds a way to run every day. And it could be later on in the evening. It could be first thing in the morning. She set herself up a group of friends where she reports that she's done her run on a WhatsApp group. and they all kind of chime in and support her, and they're doing the same thing. So just the mind shift from I try to run every day to I run every day completely changes your relationship to running every day. And she's defined running. She puts her sneakers on, that's one thing, and she runs at least 2K. That's the other thing. I mean, I just thought that was fantastic. That is someone who's hacked a solution to damaging their own fitness by not exercising as often as they should.
And I assume that she probably, when she started this over 2,000 days ago, that she probably had her fitness was at a level, or her body was at a level that she didn't like. And she's like, I really got to get back in my fitness. I got to do this, but the business. And eventually one day she just decided, like, she put it, hey, this is going to happen. And I'm willing to bet also, because I've been through stuff like this myself, that after she started to focus on it, that she realized she had a lot more time than she thought. And it almost like reorganized her priorities automatically through forcing herself to do one thing that was outside of the business that she knew she had to do.
I think she referenced Atomic Habits, which was that James Clear, Atomic Habits?
It is James
Yeah,
Clear.
I mean, it's one of the best-selling business books of all time, apart from Who Moved My Cheese, which is still one of my favorites.
That's
But
Who Moved My Cheese is a really good too.
25 million copies. I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of people think that's a good book. Anyway, I love a parable. As you can tell, I do like a story.
Yeah.
But she put it down to Atomic Habits, and it was putting on her sneakers. She said if she could make sure she got her sneakers on, then she knew she was going to go for a run. Once she'd done that, so she always had them somewhere very, she never, if they got wet, she didn't throw them in a room and leave them to rot. She always had them out and ready to go, and that was her cue. But he says that, and she said the same thing, is good habits, positive habits breed positive habits, don't they? I mean, they're like a snowball that rolls and grows. And in the same way, it goes the other way. And once you start some sort of bad behaviors or damaging behaviors, they can snowball in the opposite direction. I don't know what the opposite of a snowball is, but who knows? Lost the analogy, died at that point. Sorry, everybody. But yeah, but you're absolutely right. Once you start, this is why I think giving emotional overdraft a name, a label, is so important, because even just recognizing that that's the behavior you're doing means you will start relating to it differently and potentially behaving differently. So you don't even need to buy the book. And my publisher hates me saying that. Do buy the book if you want to. But just thinking about the label, going, oh God, look, I'm adding something to my emotional overdraft here. I'm building my emotional overdraft when I possibly don't need to. You don't have to have the answer, but just recognize it in the moment. And it's kind of the point you're making. It's enough to give you some pause, to get you to stop. And sometimes if you stop and just take a breath, that's enough. That's enough just to give you an alternative solution.
Well, it's the concept of awareness, right? So a lot of times when we become aware of something that's happening, that may be subconscious programming within our minds, or maybe loops, the negative loops that we've got into, negative thought patterns. That when you become aware of the thought pattern, it's a lot easier for you to be like, wait a second, I keep doing this, and it's causing these things to happen in my life, to show up, because I keep having this thought pattern. It's a lot easier. And that's what you naming it, the emotional overdraft, that gives awareness to saying, oh, wait a second, I'm doing these things. I'm justifying my business. I'm justifying with these what you called your drivers. These drivers are giving me justification to really just go all in on this business and overdraft myself, and it's having effects on me. It's having effects on my family, et cetera, et cetera. But I like the drivers and how you talk about them, but how you showcase, in a sense, how they're almost like it's like a positive spin, or it's a positive behavior. It's like a negative spin on a positive behavior, right?
Well, it's empathy is my favorite example of that.
Yeah.
Because if I say to leaders, should you be empathetic? They go,
Yes.
yeah, of course you should be empathetic. And of course you should. So these drivers, as I call them, are behaviors really. And yes, you should be empathetic, but you shouldn't be empathetic to the point where, it's a great example, a client I work with or worked with a while ago, um, would never take holidays. He would always allow his team to take people with kids need to take holiday time off, and half term, we call it in the UK. I don't know what halfway through the semester. Do you have a break? Maybe you don't, but we have a
Halfway
thing called
through.
half term. It's a short holiday in the middle of each
Yeah,
semester.
we have fall break and summer and spring break.
Oh, okay, there you go. So
So
what he would
basically,
do, he would be empathetic. He'd recognize his team had kids, and he'd let them have those holidays, and he would sort of cover.
yeah,
And he said to me, the problem is I never see my kids, and he's got 3 young kids actually. He said, I never see my kids. He said, what's the answer? And I said, well, what do you think the answer is? And he said, well, I really want to see my kids. And I said, well, do you really think you sacrificing the time with your children, which is precious and rare and important, do you think anyone in the business is really going to thank you for that? Or do they think, I want him to go and to be more balanced, to be more connected, to be more present for his kids? Ask them. And he asked some of his team, and they went, all of them said, we had no idea. We thought maybe you had problems at home, or, why were you not spending time? We'd love you to spend more time with your kids. We want you to be happy. We don't want you to sacrifice yourself for us. So empathy is a brilliant leadership quality, and it's one you can't fake. So if we talk about authenticity, you can't fake empathy, not
right,
really. But it can be a force for good, and it can be a force for bad. And when you're running up an emotional overdraft, you're being over empathetic. You're giving too much of yourself and of your family and your life and your health and your mentality and all those other things.
right,
So it's a great thing. The drivers are not bad things in themselves. They are, JFDI, just flip and do it. It's a great, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a founder, if you're creating something, making quick decisions, getting stuff done is a brilliant reflex. It's going to get you a long way. But also, at some point, it's gonna cause you grief, because you'll be you'll overburden your staff. You're gonna jump in too often. You're gonna micromanage, and then they're going to get frustrated, and the good people go and the poor people stay, because that's what happens. And you end up with worse and worse people working in your business. And one day you think, why am I flogging myself for this lot? These are a bunch of idiots. But you kind of reap what you sow. So, JFDI, brilliant. Just flip and do it. Get on and crack on and do stuff. That's one of the best attributes of an entrepreneur. But at the same time, it can be a really limiting behavior. So
yes.
that's all I'm trying to say is, and you talked about recognizing the term. Do you want me to stop talking, or shall I just carry on?
Keep going.
Okay,
For
I'm
those of you
going.
that aren't watching the video, I am got my allergies are kicking in really hard, and so
I don't think that's what's happening. Greg's explaining this away, but I think he's getting emotional now. I'm loving it.
I am
I'm
getting
loving that Greg
emotional.
is
Now my
so
eyes are
invested.
underwater.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to see a grown man cry. Well done,
Yeah,
Greg.
it is.
But the idea of recognizing the thing, and naming it, it's really important. And I do talk about this in the book, but not as much as I probably wanted to. It's 50,000 words, which is a typical business book. My editor said, you've got to lose 100,000 words. This book is way too long. So I took a load of stuff out. But the really important idea that we live in our mind, our thinking creates our reality. I know this sounds a bit new age and hippie, but the world you experience is literally created in your own thinking.
Yes.
We all experience it differently, and we create it. And your thinking determines your feelings. What's the lovely expression? A lady called Rena Loizu, who's a coach, who's coached me, said that your feelings are a measure of the quality of your thinking. Your feelings are a measure of the quality of your thinking. I think that's, if you want to recognize what's going on, and if you're getting frustrated or angry or bitter or irritated, your feelings are a measure of the quality of your thinking. Stop, use that recognition and go, hang on. So what's going on in my thinking right now? And particularly what we do is you touched on it just then, Greg. You said, we're looking to blame other people, or we're looking to blame other things. No one is dictating how you feel. Your thinking creates how you feel, and you can control it. It's the most, when you can work that out, that's the most incredibly powerful thing you can find.
Yes.
But that idea of recognizing your feelings, Brené Brown wrote that incredible book, the amazing Brené Brown, not a relative, wrote Atlas of the Heart, which is, she's saying we need to define more words for emotions or feelings. And most people, if you say, give us some words, they'll go happy, sad, angry, frustrated, and sort of stop about there. She's come up, I think, with 87 different words, definitions for feelings. And the more words we have for it, the more easily we can recognize it, the more easily we recognize our feelings and our emotions, the more we can do about it. And that's, I just think that's I've run businesses, I've sold businesses, I've advised very successful people. So I am definitely not, if you're thinking, well, emotional overdraft, this guy's just a touchy-feely, soft-centered idiot. I've run very successful businesses where people have thrived and built their careers, who still come back to me and tell me, how much they got out of working with me. So this is not about touchy-feely. This is about just understanding how your thinking is impacting your business. It's understanding how your thinking is impacting your ability to influence people around you and have an impact on the world you live in.
I 1,000% agree. A lot of these are termed under like law of attraction, manifestation, active visualization, even metaphysics, like metaphysical science, stuff like that. And I've been reading a lot of Joe Dispenza lately. So it's great to have this conversation. So I completely agree. And there's a scene in the movie Inception when they're sitting in the coffee shop. He's sitting with the girl and he's talking to her and they're just having a really conversation. He was like, hey, you notice how in a dream you don't really realize how you got to where you are. You just happen to be there. And she's like, yeah. And he was like, how do we get to this coffee shop? And then she at the moment she kind of realizes that they're in a dream, and that's when everything starts to change and he starts to manipulate everything. And that's a good like example of almost of like sometimes the reality, like in a dream world, we're in our subconscious mind sleeping, and our world is being produced as we're living it in our mind and our dreams. And it's very similar awake. The more that you focus on certain things, you're basically telling your RAS, your reticular activating system, like, this is what's important to me. It doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, but if you sit in a negative state and you can't get out of that negativity, that's what's important to you. That's what you think about, and that's what is going to be searching the world for, and it's going to make it happen again, over and over and over again. You get like,
because the mind likes to be right, and it goes looking for evidence to prove it's correct.
Exactly.
And if you wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to have, it's a miserable rainy day, and I've got some awful client meetings coming up, and I've got a load of things to do. I'm not going to get everything done, and I'm going to feel like a failure at the end of the day. Sure as eggs is eggs. You are going to have a rough day. You're going to have a rough day because your mind is going to go looking for evidence that you were correct. And at the end of the day, your brain will go, told you so.
Yep.
And you can go to bed feeling great about yourself because you were right. You had a crap day. Sorry if I'm not allowed to say that.
No, you can say that. But here's the thing is that you may think, well, like, that's a miserable existence. Why do I live like that? Because your brain's already said it's going to happen, and you've already been through it before. So your brain, and like all of us are hardwired for survival. We're hardwired to keep us out of danger, out of like imminent danger. So if you've already experienced those bad days and you survived, your brain knows, well, I'm going to live through it, and it's predictable, right? So I can go through the motions. I can conserve energy. This is what your brain's saying. I can conserve energy. I can go through the motions, and I can just keep having the same day, and I'm going to be right anyways because life sucks, right? Whereas if you try to change that behavior, try to do something and have a different thought process, well, now it's kind of unknown. And now your brain has to turn on and kick on overtime to continue to scan for threats, for all kinds of things that might go wrong in order to keep you safe. So it's easy to get into those negative behavioral patterns and those cycles that just continue to repeat themselves. It's hard to break free of those. This is something that James Clear also talks about a lot in
it's caveman thinking. You basically need to find food and survive. You have to outthink the saber-toothed tiger, or you die. And if it's worked, and you'll keep doing it. If you do something different, there's risk, and you might get killed. And that's, our brain thinks that way. It rewards negativity. It's why we don't celebrate our successes nearly as much as we should, because the brain goes, great, we survived. I mean, it doesn't matter. We won a pitch, we sold some insurance, we, beat our targets. Great. But immediately we're looking at, but what's happening next? And what's the other thing? And what's going to happen? Because we don't get value, or we didn't when we had to hide from saber-toothed tigers. We didn't get value from recognizing what went well. We recognized that we survived and went looking for more danger to avoid. So
Yep.
you're exactly right.
So
Exactly right.
that's
In fact, sorry, but the manifestation thing, there's loads of writing around skiers. I don't know if you know this idea of skiing. So if you're skiing, I don't ski. I busted my knees up playing sports years ago, but I run now, but I don't ski. But if you're skiing between trees, if you focus on the gaps between the trees, you will hit the gaps between the trees.
yep.
You absolutely do. If you focus on the trees and go, I must avoid the trees, you will absolutely hit the trees.
Yep.
And that's the way the brain works. All it will do is try and just about avoid the trees. Whereas if you see the gaps, this is the way great artists work with negative space. They see the space around the thing they're painting. They understand the space around it, and then they can create in doing that, they actually then create the thing.
Yep.
The brain works exactly the same way. Look for the gaps between the trees. Don't look for the trees. If you're worrying about the trees, you're gonna hit the trees. And that's physical. That's not made up. That's not woo-woo. That's not me telling you got to, trust it. That is the way the brain works.
Yep.
Avoid the bloody trees.
And what the brain believes to be true, it'll physiologically change your body as well. There's a study that I recently was reviewing as part of my fitness coaching, but it was a study about they took I think it was like 4 different parties, and it was on steroids, and there's two groups that they gave them steroids, and they told one group in the person one test group, hey, this is steroids, right? And then they told the next group, this is water pills, basically, like this is just sugar pills, this is a placebo. Okay. Then they took a group and they gave them placebo. So they took 2 more groups, gave them placebo. One of them, they said, hey, this is a steroid. Everyone's like, hey, this is a placebo. So the people that took the steroid, that knew it was a steroid, they got like 30% muscle growth over like a 6-week period. Okay. The people that took steroids and thought it was a placebo, they got almost 0 muscle growth over a 6-week period. The people that took the placebo and thought it was a steroid got like 30, like it was like 2% less. It was like 32 to 30% of muscle growth. They were taking placebo. They were told it was a steroid. They believed it was a steroid. They got almost the same exact muscle growth as the group that took the steroid and knew it was a steroid. And then the group that was taking the placebo, knew it was placebo, 0 growth, obviously. Okay. So the point is that whatever your mind believes is the truth, your body will then compensate for it. Your body then reacts in kind, right? So there's levels upon levels when you look at like this manifestation and like what your mind believes, your thought patterns, your limiting beliefs. You have a limiting belief, and everyone's limiting belief was given to you. It's not something that it is not an original thought that happened. So people are like, well, I'm just a really shy person. You didn't have that original thought. Someone told you at one point that you were shy, like, and it made you think that you were shy, or you had an experience where you got nervous and you're just like, now, like, I'm just a shy person. No, you're not. You're putting yourself in that box. And since you're talking it and you're speaking out loud, you're telling yourself that, you now believe it. So now you just get really nervous whenever you're in any environment where there's other people talking, or talking in front of a group of, say, 5 people or more, right? But everything, all those limiting beliefs that you've been telling yourself, somebody at some point in time has put that belief on you, and you have now made it law, right? And you now believe it. It's the same as the effect that these people were having from placebos and not placebos. So something to really think about when you talk about your thoughts and your emotions, manifestation. Hey, even with the emotional overdraft, I'm sure there's people that really have convinced themselves, like, I have to do this for my job because this is what, like, one of my favorite ones, the number 10 was self-worth, right? Like, I have to do this because my job is like, it's me, and it succeeds. It gives me.
I identify with this behavior because I am that person.
Yes. Yeah.
No, you're not.
Yeah. Something's happened that makes you think
it's great that you feel that way. It's great that it matters to you. It's great that you identify strongly with your work. but it doesn't define you. And you don't just let it happen out of habit. You don't let it happen out of programming. And you're absolutely right. Someone told you this, or you told you this, or you read this somewhere and you decided that was what the case was going to be. It is just not the case.
Yeah.
So stop for a second, take a beat, use those feelings or those emotions as a cue for the quality of your thinking, and go, well, what's actually going on in my thinking here? What am I creating for myself? How could I do this differently? You know, if I absolutely identify my business, you know, you're chained. If you identify yourself with your business to that level, you are chained to it forever. And most of my clients at some point want to sell their business, which is fair enough. Get some reward for the effort they put in. If you identify entirely with that, what is going to happen to you the day you take the check?
Exactly.
You're going to have
That's
all
such
sorts
a
of
good
problems.
point. Yeah, that's such a good point. If your entire identity is wrapped up in like your business and building your business and who you are, and then you sell it, what happens to your identity at that point?
And I can tell you what happens as well, because I worked in a business years ago, and they sold their agency to Group M, a big network agency, and the three founders got 40 million pounds, so maybe 50-60 million dollars each.
Yeah.
Two of them left and set up a charity together. One of them's still working in the business 5 years later, still working in the business. Now that's someone who could do, I mean, one of the cleverest men I met, could do anything he wanted to, could do anything at all. But I suspect he's so locked into that business that even though he's got more money than most of us will see ever, he can't decouple from it. And you got to think, what a shame, because what he could do with his skills and his brain would be astonishing. And I'm sure he loves his job, and I'm not questioning him personally, but as an example, I'd love to have a conversation with him. I might phone him up. I might phone him this week and just see how he's doing.
Get it on a podcast. Get it recorded. But no, this has been an interesting conversation, Andy. I appreciate you jumping on and kind of talking about your book. If anyone's actually is interested in buying the book, where's the best place? I assume Amazon is probably the best place to just purchase it.
I'm sure nobody here listening knows where to buy a book. It's a very complicated and arcane process, but maybe look on the internet. Yeah. But I mean, I referenced a few books whilst we've been talking. I love reading books. I think it's a great thing to do. I think it's one of the things people with emotional overdraft, founders and entrepreneurs who are stuck in the doing, don't make time to do, and that curiosity gets stifled. I would happily, if anyone wants to get some recommendations from me, find me online. Emotional Overdraft is the website. Look it up on Amazon if you want the book. But drop me a note and ask me if you've got something you're interested in. I'll happily recommend some books to people if they want to. The other thing is I've got an emotional overdraft self-assessment. It's sort of 50 question yes no type thing online, where you can work out where your drivers are. So it doesn't need to tell you if you've got an emotional overdraft, because you've got one. So that's, we know that. It's where is your overdraft occurring? And once you know that, then you can start to do something about it. If you do that, you can get it emailed to you, but the system will send it to you. Forward that to me and I'll happily give you some thoughts on what you could do about your drivers if you want me to. That's probably more useful than me plugging my Instagram or TikTok, which I don't have, by the way.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for jumping on. For those of you listening, do me a favor, go check out the assessment. Just do the assessment. It's completely free. I'll put in the show notes where you can actually find it. But take your time to go do the assessment. And if you're a reader like myself, I'll be checking out your book. Go check out his book, Emotional Overdraft. So last question I ask everybody, Andy. You have the opportunity to sit with, learn from, break bread with 3 individuals, anyone in history, alive or deceased. Who would they be and why?
I've got a slightly weird list. So I would say Greg McKeown, who's still very alive, who co-wrote a book called Multipliers, which was one of the most... Do you know the book? Liz Wiseman wrote it with him.
Yeah.
Unbelievably good management book. And he's still alive. He lives in Australia. So for me, that's as far away as you can go without coming back. I'd love to spend some time chatting to him about that, because he's written 2 or 3 really, really fantastic books, and I'd like to understand what goes on in his brain. I'd love to spend time with Albert Einstein. I think how you get from no one knew to humankind defining concepts simply by thinking about it. You'll have guessed already my interest is in thinking, so I'd love to understand that. I'd really love to understand that. I think, I don't know if I'd understand him because I don't speak German, but we can try. And by the way, Albert Einstein couldn't remember his own phone number. He never bothered remembering his own phone number because he said, it's in the book. If I need it, I can look it up, but why do I need it? I mean, what a brain, what a way of seeing the world. That's what I'd like to understand more of.
Yeah.
And the third one, I backwards and forwards on the third person I might speak to. It's a bit weird, but I wouldn't mind meeting a pirate, like a genuine pirate, because pirates weren't really quite what we thought they were. Most of them were paid for by the government or paid for by a king or a queen somewhere and given permission to go and cause trouble. And they were so creative and so inventive, and obviously, bonkers bloodthirsty, but that's not the bit I'm interested in. But what caused people to go off and do that? I mean, they were the most extreme explorers of their time in a way. To understand, I probably want to do it at a distance, maybe over a Zoom, just in case. But I'd like to understand what drove people when no one knew what the world really was, and we didn't know where the edges were, and we didn't really understand. They were just people who had confidence and belief and something about them. Yeah, but I don't know any of them well enough to pick one. But a pirate.
That's awesome. Actually, I like that last one. That's pretty unique. Thank you so much, Andy, for jumping on the podcast.
Lovely to meet you.
It's lovely to meet you as well. For all of you listening until now, you obviously got value. So do me a favor, go share this show with other people that can also get value from it. It takes you 30 to 60 seconds to share, to rate, review, subscribe. But it means the world to both Andy and I, especially with his book just recently coming out, in order to reach more people. So this has been the Be the Difference podcast. I'm your host, Greg Birch. Until next time, we'll see you. Take care.